What if the quiet woman who cleaned your mansion held a secret that could save your family? They tried to break into his world, but they had no idea who was already inside. Like the video, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel so we can reach 1,000 subscribers this month. The humid Louisiana air hung heavy around the sprawling Baton Rouge estate, even as the sun began its slow descent. Inside the opulent study, overlooking manicured gardens that stretched toward the Mississippi, Julian Thorne, a tech billionaire with the world at his fingertips, felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in his chest. It had been 5 years since Amelia, his vibrant and fiercely protective wife, had been taken by a rare form of cancer. 5 years of navigating life, business, and raising their now 10-year-old son, Ethan, alone. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, the expensive bourbon doing little to soothe his unease. Lately, a sense of vulnerability had been creeping into his meticulously ordered life. Perhaps it was the increasing public profile of his company, Thorne Industries, or maybe just the constant reminder of Amelia's absence, leaving a void no amount of success could fill. He glanced at the framed photograph on his mahogany desk. Amelia's radiant smile seemed to mock his current state. She had always been the strong one, the anchor in their sometimes turbulent lives. He missed her sharp wit, her unwavering support, and the quiet confidence she exuded. A soft knock on the study door interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Thorne?" It was Maria, their housekeeper. She had been with them for 3 years, a quiet, almost invisible presence who efficiently managed the household. He knew little about her personal life, only that she was a widow and incredibly reliable. "Come in, Maria," Julian said, his voice a little rough. Maria entered, her usual gentle demeanor slightly hesitant. "Excuse me, sir, but Ethan is in the backyard. He asked if I could show him some things." Julian frowned. "Show him what?" Ethan was usually glued to his video games or lost in a book. He wasn't particularly interested in outdoor activities, let alone asking Maria for lessons. "Just some exercises, sir." He seemed quite keen. Maria's gaze flickered towards the window, then back to Julian. Curiosity piqued. Julian set his glass down. "Exercises? What kind of exercises?" "Nothing strenuous, sir. Just balance and coordination." He stood up, a sense of unease mingling with his curiosity. "Let's go see." He followed Maria out of the study, through the airy living room, and towards the back door. As they stepped onto the patio, the scene that unfolded before Julian's eyes stopped him in his tracks. Ethan, usually clumsy and hesitant in any physical activity, was moving with a surprising degree of focus. Maria, her normally placid face now etched with intense concentration, was guiding him through a series of movements Julian couldn't quite place. It wasn't play, it was deliberate, precise. Ethan threw a jab, his small fist connecting with Maria's outstretched, padded hand. Maria corrected his stance, her voice calm but firm. "No, Ethan, remember, rotate your hips. Power comes from the core." Julian watched, a growing sense of disbelief washing over him. Maria, his quiet, unassuming housekeeper, teaching his son to fight. Ethan executed the jab again, this time with more force. Maria nodded, a rare smile gracing her lips. "Better. Now, let's try a block." Julian stepped forward, his voice sharper than he intended. "What's going on here?" Ethan turned, his eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and guilt. "Dad, we were just—" Maria's movements ceased, and she turned to face Julian, her expression unreadable. The setting sun cast long shadows across the lawn, making the moment feel strangely dramatic. "Mr. Thorne," Maria said, her voice steady, "Ethan expressed an interest in learning some self-defense. I was just showing him some basic techniques." "Self-defense?" Julian repeated, his mind racing. Ethan had never mentioned anything about this. And Maria? Where had she learned these moves? They looked far beyond basic. "Yes, sir. I thought it would be a good way for him to build confidence and learn how to protect himself." Julian's gaze flickered between his son, who looked increasingly uncomfortable, and Maria, whose calm demeanor was starting to feel less reassuring and more guarded. "Maria," Julian began, his voice low, "where did you learn to do this?" A flicker of something, hesitation, fear, crossed Maria's eyes before she quickly masked it. I took some classes a long time ago, sir." "Classes?" Julian scoffed, the image of her expertly guiding Ethan's movements still vivid in his mind. "Those weren't just some basic self-defense classes, Maria. That looked like professional training." Maria remained silent, her gaze fixed on the ground. "Look at me, Maria," Julian insisted. She finally raised her eyes, and Julian was struck by the intensity he saw within them. It was a look that didn't belong on the face of a mild-mannered housekeeper. "Mr. Thorne," she said softly, "there's something I need to tell you." His heart began to pound. He had a feeling this conversation was about to take a very unexpected turn. 5 minutes later, they were in the study, the setting sun painting the room in hues of orange and purple. Ethan had been sent to his room, his earlier enthusiasm replaced by a palpable nervousness. Julian sat behind his desk, his hands clasped tightly, while Maria stood opposite him, her posture surprisingly formal. "All right, Maria," Julian said, his voice firm but trying to remain calm. "I think you owe me an explanation, and I expect the truth." Maria took a deep breath. "Mr. Thorne, you're right. I haven't been entirely honest with you about my background." "That's an understatement," Julian muttered. "Before I came to work for you," Maria continued, her voice gaining a newfound strength, "I had a different career." "And what was that career, Maria?" Julian asked, his mind conjuring up all sorts of possibilities, none of them involving dusting furniture and doing laundry. "I was a bodyguard, Mr. Thorne." Julian stared at her, his mind struggling to process the information. "Maria? A bodyguard? This quiet woman who always seemed to blend into the background? A bodyguard?" he repeated incredulously. "You're telling me you were a professional bodyguard?" "Yes, sir. I was trained in several forms of martial arts, close quarters combat, evasive driving, surveillance, the works." Julian leaned back in his chair, a wave of disbelief washing over him. This couldn't be real. "But why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice laced with confusion. "When I hired you, you presented yourself as a housekeeper." "That was the agreement," Maria said, her gaze unwavering. "Agreement? With whom?" Maria hesitated for a moment, her eyes filled with a sudden sadness. "With your wife, Mr. Thorne, with Amelia." Julian's breath caught in his throat. "Amelia? This was her doing?" "Amelia knew?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes, sir. She hired me." The revelation hit Julian like a physical blow. He felt a sudden dizziness, the carefully constructed reality of the past 5 years tilting on its axis. Amelia had kept this a secret from him? "But why?" he stammered, his mind reeling. "Why would she do that?" "She was worried, Mr. Thorne," Maria explained, her voice gentle. "Even before she got sick, she was concerned about your safety, about Ethan's. Your company was growing, your profile was rising. She knew there were people out there who might try to take advantage of your success to harm your family." Julian's mind flashed back to a few incidents over the years. A vague threat, a suspicious encounter. At the time, he had dismissed them, attributing them to the cost of doing business. But Amelia, she had seen something he hadn't. "So she hired you as a bodyguard?" he asked, still trying to grasp the enormity of the situation. "Yes, sir, but she knew you wouldn't accept it if she presented me as such. You would have seen it as an unnecessary expense, perhaps even an intrusion on your privacy. So she arranged for me to be hired as the housekeeper. It was the perfect cover." Julian ran a hand through his hair, his mind a whirlwind of emotions, shock, confusion, a strange sense of betrayal, and yet also a flicker of understanding. Amelia had always been fiercely protective of them. "She never told me," he said, the hurt evident in his voice. "She wanted to, Mr. Thorne, many times. But she was afraid you would be angry, that you would insist I leave. She believed it was better for you and Ethan if I stayed, even if it meant keeping the truth from you." Julian thought back to the past 3 years. Maria had been a constant, quiet presence in their lives. Always efficient, always discreet. He had never suspected a thing. "And Ethan?" he asked. "Does he know?" "No, sir, not until today. He saw me practicing some moves in the garden a few weeks ago and asked if I could teach him. I hesitated, but then I thought maybe it was time. He's getting older. He needs to learn how to defend himself." Julian nodded slowly, the logic making a strange kind of sense. "So all this time," he began, trailing off, "all this time, Mr. Thorne, I've been here to protect you and Ethan. It was Amelia's wish." A heavy silence fell over the study, broken only by the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Julian stared at Maria, seeing her now in a completely different light. The quiet housekeeper was a highly trained protector, a secret weapon his deceased wife had put in place. He felt a surge of gratitude towards Amelia, mixed with a pang of regret for not knowing this while she was still alive. He also felt a growing sense of unease. If Amelia felt the need to hire a bodyguard in secret, what had she known that he didn't? What potential threats had she foreseen? Maria, he said finally, his voice serious. Did Amelia ever mention any specific concerns? Any particular threats? The revelation of Maria's true role cast a long shadow over Julian's perception of his world. It wasn't just about a secret bodyguard, it was about the tangible threats that Amelia had perceived, threats that Julian had unwittingly downplayed. The primary source of Amelia's concern, as Maria had revealed, was Stellar Tech, a rival corporation headed by the ambitious and ruthless Victor Martel. Thorne Industries had carved a niche for itself with its groundbreaking advancements in renewable energy technology. Their latest project, a revolutionary solar power system with unprecedented efficiency, was on the verge of completion. This technology had the potential to disrupt the entire energy sector, and Stellar Tech, a major player in traditional fossil fuels, stood to lose significant market share. Victor Martel, the CEO of Stellar Tech, was known for his aggressive tactics. He had built his empire through acquisitions, mergers, and sometimes less than ethical means. Amelia had always suspected that Martel would stop at nothing to gain access to Thorne Industries' technology. He's like a shark, Julian, Amelia had once said, her voice laced with worry. He smells blood in the water, and he won't stop until he gets what he wants. Amelia's concerns weren't unfounded. There had been a series of incidents that, in retrospect, seemed more sinister. A few years prior, a fire had broken out in Thorne Industries' research lab, destroying valuable prototypes. The official investigation ruled it an accident, but Amelia had suspected sabotage. Then there were the subtle attempts to poach Thorne Industries' top engineers with offers of exorbitant salaries and lavish perks. Some had even reported receiving veiled threats if they refused. Martel's methods weren't limited to corporate espionage. Amelia had also uncovered evidence of his involvement in industrial sabotage and even blackmail. He was a man who operated in the shadows, pulling strings and manipulating events to his advantage. One particular incident had deeply troubled Amelia. A former Thorne Industries employee who had left the company to join Stellar Tech had mysteriously disappeared. There was no evidence of foul play, but Amelia suspected that Martel was involved. She feared that the employee might have had a change of heart or threatened to expose Martel's unethical practices. Amelia had confided in Maria about her fears. She had shared the evidence she had gathered, the suspicious incidents, and her growing conviction that Stellar Tech posed a real danger to their family. Maria, with her background in security, had taken Amelia's concerns seriously. She had conducted her own discreet investigation, confirming Amelia's suspicions and uncovering even more disturbing details about Martel's operations. Maria had discovered that Martel had infiltrated Thorne Industries' computer network, planting spyware to monitor their communications and steal sensitive data. He had also hired private investigators to track Julian's movements and gather information about his personal life. Martel was building a dossier on Julian, looking for any weakness he could exploit. The most alarming discovery was that Martel had been in contact with individuals involved in organized crime. Amelia feared that Martel might resort to violence if his other methods failed. She knew that she had to protect Julian and Ethan, even if it meant keeping the truth from Julian himself. This was the context behind Amelia's decision to hire Maria as a secret bodyguard. She knew that Maria was the only person she could trust to protect her family from the ruthless Victor Martel and the looming threat of Stellar Tech. 2 weeks later, life at the Thorne estate had settled into a new, albeit slightly surreal, rhythm. The revelation about Maria had shaken Julian, forcing him to reevaluate everything he thought he knew about his wife and the quiet woman who had been living under his roof. He had spent the past 2 weeks in a state of quiet contemplation, poring over old emails and documents, trying to piece together any clues Amelia might have left behind. He had also spent several hours talking to Maria, trying to understand the extent of her training and the specific concerns Amelia had voiced. Maria had been surprisingly forthcoming, sharing details about her past life as a high-level security operative and recounting conversations she had had with Amelia. She had spoken of Amelia's deep-seated fear for their family's safety, a fear that had intensified as Julian's company grew in prominence. She worried about corporate espionage, Mr. Thorne, Maria had explained, about people trying to steal your technology, to sabotage your work, but she was also concerned about more personal threats, rivals, disgruntled former employees, people who might hold a grudge. Julian had always been focused on his work, on building his empire. He had been aware of the competitive nature of the tech industry, but he had never truly considered the potential for real danger. Amelia, it seemed, had been much more perceptive. He had also observed Maria's interactions with Ethan more closely. The self-defense lessons continued, but now Julian watched with a different understanding. He saw not just a housekeeper teaching a boy some moves, but a skilled professional imparting crucial life skills. Ethan, initially hesitant, was now showing a genuine interest, his confidence visibly growing. One afternoon, Julian found Maria and Ethan in the backyard, practicing a series of evasive maneuvers. Ethan, surprisingly agile, managed to duck and weave around Maria's gentle attempts to attack him. "Good, Ethan," Maria praised. "Keep your eyes on your opponent. Always be aware of your surroundings." Julian watched, a sense of gratitude washing over him. Amelia had made an extraordinary decision entrusting their son's safety to this capable woman. Later that evening, Julian sat down with Ethan in the study. "Hey, buddy," he said, smiling. "I saw you practicing with Maria today. You're getting pretty good." Ethan beamed. "It's really cool, Dad. Maria knows all sorts of stuff. She even showed me how to get out of a chokehold." Julian's smile tightened slightly. "She did, huh?" "Yeah, she said it's important to know how to defend yourself just in case." Julian ruffled his son's hair. "She's right. It is important." He hesitated for a moment, then decided to broach the subject. "Ethan, do you know that Maria used to be a bodyguard?" Ethan's eyes widened. "Really? Wow, that's so cool. Like in the movies?" Julian chuckled. "Something like that. Your mom, she hired Maria to help keep us safe." Ethan's expression turned thoughtful. "Mom knew Maria was a bodyguard?" "Yes, she did. She wanted to make sure we were protected." Ethan nodded slowly, processing the information. "That makes sense. Mom was always worried about us." The conversation with Ethan, while brief, had been surprisingly cathartic. It felt good to finally acknowledge the truth, to bring the secret out into the open within their small family unit. However, the underlying unease about the potential threats Amelia had foreseen still lingered in Julian's mind. He decided it was time to take a more proactive approach. He contacted a private security firm, one known for its discretion and expertise in handling high-profile clients. He requested a thorough security assessment of his home and his company, wanting to understand the potential risks they faced. The security experts arrived a few days later, a team of quiet, efficient professionals who meticulously examined every aspect of Julian's life. They installed state-of-the-art surveillance systems, reviewed his company's security protocols, and even conducted background checks on key employees. Their findings were sobering. While there were no immediate credible threats, they identified several vulnerabilities and recommended a significant increase in security measures. They also confirmed what Maria had already told him, that Thorne Industries, with its groundbreaking technology, was a prime target for corporate espionage. Julian authorized all the recommended upgrades, his earlier reluctance replaced by a newfound sense of urgency. He also had several long conversations with the head of the security firm, a former FBI agent named Agent Davies. "Your wife was a very smart woman, Mr. Thorne," Davies had said during one of their meetings. "Hiring Ms. Vargas, Maria, was a brilliant move. She's highly skilled and has been providing you with a level of protection you weren't even aware of." Davies had also confirmed Maria's credentials, providing Julian with a detailed account of her impressive career in the security industry. It turned out Maria Vargas was a legend in her field, known for her exceptional skills and her unwavering dedication to her clients. As Julian absorbed this information, his respect for Maria grew exponentially. She wasn't just a housekeeper. She was a highly trained professional who'd been living a double life for the past 3 years, all to fulfill a promise to his deceased wife. Supposed 3 months later, the heightened security measures had become a normal part of life at the Thorne estate. Julian had adjusted to the presence of discreet security personnel, and Ethan had even developed a friendly rapport with some of them. Maria continued her duties as housekeeper, but now there was an unspoken understanding between her and Julian. He knew her secret, and he trusted her implicitly. One evening, as Julian was working late in his study, Maria knocked on the door. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice unusually serious, "there's something you need to see." Julian looked up, his heart sinking. Maria's serious tone always meant trouble. "What is it, Maria?" She held out a tablet. "I intercepted this email earlier today. It was flagged by our new security system." Julian took the tablet and read the email. It was short and cryptic, but the message was clear. Someone was planning something. The email mentioned Thorne Industries and a specific date next week. "What do you make of this?" Julian asked, his brow furrowed. "It's a threat, Mr. Thorne," Maria said, her eyes narrowed. "A credible one. They're planning to make a move." Julian felt a cold dread wash over him. Amelia's fears were coming to fruition. "Who do you think is behind this?" he asked. Maria hesitated for a moment. "I have my suspicions, sir. There was a rival company, Stellar Tech, that Amelia was particularly concerned about. Their CEO, Victor Martel, has a reputation for being ruthless." Julian remembered Amelia mentioning Martel. He had dismissed her concerns at the time, but now her words echoed in his mind. "What do we do?" he asked Maria, his voice filled with urgency. "We prepare, Mr. Thorne," Maria said, her gaze determined. "We've been expecting something like this. The security team is on high alert. We'll be ready for them." Over the next few days, the atmosphere at the Thorne estate was tense. The security team was on constant patrol, and Maria was even more vigilant than usual. She reviewed security protocols with Julian and Ethan, making sure they knew what to do in case of an emergency. Julian, who had once been oblivious to the potential dangers surrounding him, was now acutely aware of the risks. He realized how much he had taken Amelia's protection for granted. The day the email had mentioned arrived, and Julian felt a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. He went about his day as normally as possible, trying not to let his fear show. That afternoon, as he was having lunch with Ethan, the alarm system blared to life, its piercing sound echoing through the house. "What's happening?" Ethan asked, his eyes wide with fear. "It's okay, buddy," Julian said, trying to sound reassuring. "Just stay calm." Maria, who had been nearby, rushed into the dining room, her face grim. "They're here, Mr. Thorne. They're trying to breach the perimeter." Julian's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. 10 minutes later. Chaos erupted outside. Julian could hear the sounds of shouting, the screech of tires, and the occasional thud. Inside the house, Maria remained calm and collected, guiding Julian and Ethan to a secure room that had been installed as part of the security upgrades. "Stay here," she instructed them, her voice firm. "Don't open the door for anyone except me or Agent Davies." Julian nodded, his arm around a trembling Ethan. He watched as Maria disappeared out the door, a determined look on her face. He could hear her giving instructions over her earpiece, her voice calm and professional amidst the commotion. He knew, with a certainty that surprised him, that they were in good hands. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly. Julian held Ethan close, trying to shield him from the sounds of the ongoing struggle. He thought of Amelia, of her foresight, and her unwavering love for their family. He realized that by hiring Maria, she had given them the ultimate gift, a guardian angel in disguise. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the sounds of the struggle outside began to subside. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the secure room door. "Mr. Thorne? It's Agent Davies." Julian cautiously opened the door to find Agent Davies standing there, his expression grim but relieved. "It's over, Mr. Thorne," Davies said. "We apprehended them. They were trying to disable the security system and gain access to the house." "Who were they?" Julian asked, his voice hoarse. "As Miss Vargas suspected," Davies replied, "they were operatives hired by Stellar Techs, as we found evidence linking them directly to Victor Martel." Julian felt a surge of anger. Martel had actually tried to attack his home to put his family in danger. "Where's Maria?" he asked, his concern for her growing. "She's fine, Mr. Thorne," Davies assured him. "She was instrumental in coordinating the defense and apprehending the intruders." Just then, Maria appeared, her clothes slightly disheveled but otherwise unharmed. Julian felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Maria," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you. You saved us." Maria simply nodded, her gaze steady. "That's what I'm here for, Mr. Thorne." 5 months later, the attempted break-in had a profound impact on Julian. It served as a stark reminder of the dangers that lurked beneath the surface of his seemingly secure life. He had pressed charges against Victor Martel and Stellar Tech, and the ensuing legal battle was still ongoing. However, the most significant change was in Julian's relationship with Maria. The revelation of her true identity had forged a deep bond of trust and respect between them. He no longer saw her as just the housekeeper. He saw her as a protector, a friend, and a vital part of their family. Ethan, who now knew the full story, looked up to Maria with a mixture of awe and affection. He continued his self-defense lessons with her, his skills and confidence growing with each session. One sunny afternoon, Julian found Maria sitting on the porch swing, watching Ethan play in the garden. He sat down beside her, the familiar Louisiana breeze rustling through the trees. "You know," Julian said softly, "Amelia was right about you." Maria turned to him, a faint smile on her lips. "She was a very wise woman, Mr. Thorne." "She was," Julian agreed, "and I'm grateful to her and to you for everything you've done for us." Maria simply nodded, her gaze returning to Ethan. The boy was laughing as he chased a butterfly, his carefree joy a testament to the safety and security that Maria had helped provide. Julian looked out at his son, a sense of peace settling over him. He knew that life would always have its challenges, but he also knew that they weren't alone. They had Maria, their silent guardian, watching over them, a constant reminder of Amelia's enduring love and foresight. And in that knowledge, Julian found a sense of strength and resilience he never knew he possessed. The revelation had indeed stunned him, but in the end, it had also saved them. The legal battle with Stellar Tech continued, a slow and arduous process that consumed a significant portion of Julian's time and energy. However, the attempted intrusion had a silver lining. It had forced Julian to take a step back from the day-to-day operations of Thorne Industries and focus more on the bigger picture, on strategy and innovation. He found himself spending more time at home, enjoying simple moments with Ethan and Maria. The three of them had formed an unconventional but strong family unit, bound by shared experiences and a mutual respect. Ethan continued to flourish under Maria's guidance. His self-defense skills had improved dramatically, but more importantly, his confidence and self-awareness had blossomed. He was no longer the shy, introverted boy Julian had worried about. He was becoming a confident and capable young man. One bright morning, as Julian was having breakfast with Ethan, Maria entered the dining room with a thoughtful expression on her face. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice hesitant, "there's something I need to discuss with you." Julian looked up, a flicker of concern in his eyes. Maria's hesitancy was unusual. "What is it, Maria?" She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about my role here." Julian waited patiently, sensing that this was important. "When Amelia hired me," Maria continued, "it was with the understanding that my primary focus was security. But over the past few years, I've also become the housekeeper, a part of your household." "Yes," Julian affirmed. "You've been invaluable to us, Maria." "And I care deeply for both of you," Maria said, her gaze sincere. "But I feel like I'm not fully utilizing my skills. The security here is excellent now, thanks to Agent Davies' team. Ethan is learning to protect himself. I'm not sure I'm needed in the same way anymore." Julian felt a pang of disappointment. He had grown accustomed to Maria's presence, her quiet strength a comforting constant in their lives. "What are you saying, Maria?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "I'm saying, I think it might be time for me to move on, Mr. Thorne." Ethan, who had been listening intently, looked up, his eyes wide with dismay. "Move on? Where would you go, Maria?" Maria smiled gently at Ethan. "I'm not sure yet, sweetie, but there are other things I'd like to do, other ways I can use my skills to help people." Julian considered her words carefully. He understood her desire to do more, to use her talents to their full potential. He also knew that he couldn't selfishly hold her back. "I understand, Maria," he said finally, his voice tinged with sadness. "You've done so much for us, more than I can ever repay." "You've both given me a home and a purpose, Mr. Thorne," Maria replied. "I'll always be grateful for that." "When were you thinking of leaving?" Julian asked. "I haven't set a date yet," Maria said. "I wanted to talk to you about it first, and of course, I wouldn't leave until you and Ethan are completely comfortable." Julian nodded. "We'll talk more about it later. he said, his mind already racing with the implications of Maria's decision. Over the next few weeks, Julian and Maria had several conversations about her future. He offered her a generous severance package, which she initially hesitated to accept, but eventually agreed to. They also discussed how to break the news to Ethan, who was understandably upset at the thought of Maria leaving. Um, One evening, they sat down with Ethan and explained that Maria felt it was time for her to pursue other opportunities. They emphasized that she would always be a part of their family and that they would stay in touch. Ethan, though sad, seemed to understand. He hugged Maria tightly, his small arms wrapped around her. "I'll miss you, Maria," he whispered. "I'll miss you too, sweetie," Maria replied, her voice thick with emotion. As the day of Maria's departure drew closer, Julian felt a growing sense of unease. He had become so reliant on her, not just for security, but for the quiet stability she brought to their lives. He wondered how they would manage without her. On her last morning, Maria packed her few belongings. The house felt strangely empty already. Julian and Ethan stood with her in the entryway. "Thank you, Maria," Julian said, extending his hand, "for everything." Maria took his hand, her grip firm. "It was my honor, Mr. Thorne." She then turned to Ethan, kneeling down to his level. "You take care of your dad, okay, and keep practicing your moves." Ethan nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. Maria hugged him one last time, then stood up and walked out the door, disappearing into the bright Louisiana sunshine. Julian and Ethan watched her go, a profound sense of loss settling over them. The house felt quieter, emptier without her presence. 1 month later. Life without Maria took some getting used to. Julian hired a new housekeeper, a kind woman named Eleanor, but her presence didn't fill the void left by Maria. Ethan missed Maria's self-defense lessons and her quiet companionship. Julian found himself thinking about Maria often, wondering where she was and what she was doing. He had her contact information and had promised to stay in touch, but he hesitated to reach out, wanting to give her space to settle into her new life. One afternoon, Julian received a call from Agent Davies. "Mr. Thorne," Davies said, his voice serious, "we've uncovered some new information regarding the Stellar Tech situation. It seems Victor Martel had other plans in motion beyond the attempted break-in at your home." Julian's heart sank. He thought the threat from Martel had been neutralized. "What kind of plans?" he asked, his voice filled with apprehension. "We've learned that Martel was also targeting your company directly," Davies explained. "He had been trying to recruit some of your key employees, offering them substantial sums of money in exchange for sensitive information." "Corporate espionage," Julian muttered, the familiar knot of anxiety returning to his chest. "Exactly," Davies confirmed, "and we have reason to believe that he was planning to use this information to launch a hostile takeover of Thorne Industries." Julian felt a wave of anger. Martel's ruthlessness knew no bounds. "Have you been able to identify which employees he was targeting?" Julian asked. "Yes, we have," Davies replied, "and you might be surprised by one of the names on the list." Julian waited, his breath held tight. "It seems Martel had approached your head of research and development, a man named Alastair Finch." Julian was stunned. Alastair had been with Thorne Industries since the beginning. He was one of Julian's most trusted and valued employees. "Are you sure about this?" Julian asked, his voice incredulous. "We have solid evidence, Mr. Thorne," Davies assured him, including emails and financial records. Julian felt a sense of betrayal wash over him. He couldn't believe that Alastair would do this to him, to the company they had built together. "What do we do now?" Julian asked Davies. "We've already taken steps to secure the information and neutralize the threat," Davies replied. "But I wanted to make you aware of the situation. Martel is clearly not going to give up easily." Julian thanked Davies for the information and hung up the phone, his mind reeling. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. 2 days later. Julian was in his office, trying to focus on work, but his mind kept drifting back to the news about Alastair and Stellar Tech. He felt a deep sense of unease, a feeling that something else was about to happen. Suddenly, his office door burst open and Ethan rushed in, his face pale with fear. "Dad!" Ethan cried. "There are strange men outside. They're trying to get in." Julian's blood ran cold. Not again. He stood up quickly and went to the window, peering out at the driveway. He saw several unfamiliar vehicles parked near the gate, and a group of men in dark clothing were approaching the house. "Call Maria!" Ethan exclaimed, his voice trembling. Julian reached for his phone, his fingers fumbling with the buttons. He dialed Maria's number, his heart pounding in his chest. She answered on the third ring. "Maria, it's Julian. They're back. There are men trying to get into the house." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "Stay calm, Mr. Thorne," Maria said, her voice steady and reassuring. "Go to the secure room. Lock the door. I'm on my way." Julian hung up the phone, a wave of relief washing over him. He knew that Maria would come. She wouldn't let them down. He grabbed Ethan's hand and hurried towards the secure room, his mind filled with a mixture of fear and hope. He knew that whatever happened next, they wouldn't have to face it alone. Maria was coming. Their guardian angel was returning. 10 minutes later, Julian and Ethan were huddled in the secure room, the heavy steel door locked and bolted. The sounds from outside were muffled but still audible. Raised voices, the thud of something heavy hitting the house. Ethan was clinging to Julian, his small body trembling. "It's okay, buddy," Julian whispered, trying to sound braver than he felt. "Maria's coming. She'll take care of everything." He hoped he was right. He had no doubt about Maria's abilities, but he couldn't shake the fear that this time might be different. These men seemed more determined, more aggressive than before. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from downstairs, followed by the shattering of glass. Julian's heart leaped into his throat. They had breached the outer defenses. "Stay here, Ethan," Julian said, his voice firm. "No matter what, don't open this door." Ethan nodded, his eyes wide with fear. Julian cautiously approached the security monitor, his hands shaking as he activated the external cameras. He watched as several men, their faces obscured by masks, moved through the house, systematically searching each room. He recognized one of them, a burly man he had seen during the previous attempt. They were definitely professionals, and they knew what they were doing. Just as panic began to set in, Julian saw something that made his heart soar with relief. A black SUV screeched to a halt in the driveway, and Maria emerged, moving with a speed and purpose that was both reassuring and terrifying. She was dressed in practical dark clothing, and Julian could see a determined glint in her eyes. She moved swiftly towards the house, her posture radiating confidence and competence. Julian watched on the monitor as Maria engaged the intruders. She moved with incredible agility, her training evident in every precise movement. She used the environment to her advantage, disappearing behind furniture and emerging to disarm and incapacitate the intruders. Julian couldn't hear the sounds of the confrontation clearly through the secure room walls, but he could see the results on the monitor. One by one, the masked men fell, subdued by Maria's swift and efficient actions. It was a whirlwind of movement, a display of skill that left Julian breathless. Within minutes, the remaining intruders were either incapacitated or fleeing the house. Julian watched as Maria, her breathing slightly heavier but otherwise composed, surveyed the scene. She then spoke into her earpiece, presumably contacting Agent Davies' team. A few minutes later, the sound of sirens grew louder as law enforcement and security personnel arrived at the estate. Julian let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. They were safe. Maria had done it again. He unlocked the secure room door and stepped out, Ethan close behind him. The house was in disarray, furniture overturned, and debris scattered across the floor. But amidst the chaos, Maria stood calmly, talking to one of the security officers. When she saw Julian and Ethan, a small smile touched her lips. "It's over, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice calm. "They won't be bothering you again." Julian rushed forward and embraced her, a surge of gratitude overwhelming him. "Maria," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. You saved us again." Maria hugged him back, then ruffled Ethan's hair. "You were both very brave," she said. Agent Davies arrived shortly thereafter, his expression serious as he assessed the situation. He spoke with Maria and the other security personnel, gathering information about the intruders and their motives. "It seems Victor Martel was even more desperate than we thought," Davies said to Julian. "When his attempt at corporate espionage failed, he resorted to this." Julian shook his head in disbelief. Martel's obsession with Thorne Industries had reached a dangerous level. "What will happen now?" Julian asked. "We'll ensure these men are brought to justice," Davies replied. and we'll be stepping up security even further. Martel will face serious consequences for this. As the authorities began to process the scene, Julian looked at Maria, a profound sense of gratitude and admiration filling his heart. She had come back when they needed her most, without hesitation, without question. Maria, Julian began, his voice sincere, I know you were planning to move on, to pursue other things, but after what just happened, I don't know what we would do without you. Maria looked at him, her eyes filled with understanding. Mr. Thorne, she said softly, this is where I need to be. This is where Amelia wanted me to be. As long as you and Ethan need me, I'll stay. Julian felt a wave of relief wash over him. He knew that with Maria by their side, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their unconventional family was stronger than ever, bound by love, loyalty, and the unwavering protection of their silent guardian. Tirfa 1 year later, the legal battles with Victor Martel and Stellar Tech finally came to an end, with a decisive victory for Thorne Industries. Martel faced severe penalties for his illegal activities, and his company's reputation was irreparably damaged. Life at the Thorne estate settled into a comfortable rhythm once again. Julian continued to lead his company to new heights, his focus sharpened by the near threats they had faced. Ethan was now a confident and well-adjusted young teenager, excelling in school and continuing his self-defense training with Maria. Maria remained a steadfast presence in their lives, her role evolving from purely security to a trusted friend and confidant. Julian often found himself seeking her advice, valuing her sharp intellect and unwavering loyalty. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the Louisiana landscape, Julian, Ethan, and Maria sat on the porch swing, just as they had many times before. You know, Ethan said, looking at Maria with a smile, you're like a real-life superhero. Maria chuckled softly. Just looking out for my family, sweetie. Julian put his arm around Ethan and smiled at Maria. He knew that Amelia's decision to hire her, to trust her with their lives, was the most selfless and important act she had ever made. The revelation that day in the backyard had stunned him, yes, but it had also brought an extraordinary person into their lives, a person who had become an indispensable part of their family. And as he watched the sunset with his son and their silent guardian, Julian knew that they were truly blessed. Make sure to like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this story with someone. Don't forget to turn on post notifications so you'll be notified when a new story is uploaded.